Antichrist. Who is the Antichrist? It's been a common issue for a long time. People want to know who the Antichrist is. Many times in church history, various popes have been referred to as the Antichrist. Even emperors of Rome back in the first century were sometimes referred to as the Antichrist. Even fast forwarding, we find that Joseph Stalin or Hitler or Mussolini or even Robert E. Lee and Abraham Lincoln, kings, queens, presidents, Obama, Trump, all types of people have been referred to as the Antichrist, and various factions would put this label on certain people throughout church history. But as we look to the Bible, what we find is not necessarily that we are supposed to be looking for one singular Antichrist, but John warns that there are many Antichrists, and we need to identify them. Who are they? You might even be one, or your neighbor might be, or someone you even go to church with. I know, kind of scary, right? So let's find out what an Antichrist is looking at the text. 1 John chapter 2, I'm going to read through verse 18 through 22. Children, John says, it is the last hour, and as you have heard that Antichrist is coming, so now many Antichrist, plural, have come. Therefore we know that it is the last hour. They went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would have continued with us, but they went out, that it might become plain that they all are not of us. But you have been anointed by the Holy One, and you have knowledge. I write to you not because you do not know the truth, but because you know it, and because no lie is of the truth. Who is the liar but he who denies that Jesus is the Christ? This is the Antichrist, he who denies the Father and the Son. So here we have a great description of what an Antichrist is and who the Antichrist are. They are people who deny the fundamental facts and personage of Jesus Christ. They have denied that he is the Anointed One, prophesied throughout the Old Testament, the Messiah, the Christ, the only one that would be sent, who would bring salvation. They're rejecting the fact that he is the Son of God and that he has put on flesh, that he is very man, that he is very God. And who were these people? Who were the Antichrist? Or who might the Antichrist be that you and I might even know? They are people who claimed to be right with God. They were with this group of people that John was writing to at one time, but they left. And not just physically left, but they left the core teaching of Christianity. Can you be a Christian yet deny and reject the fundamental Christian faith, the fundamental doctrines of Christianity? No, you can't. And that's what John is saying here. This letter that he is writing is extremely polarizing. He says you're either a Christian and you're pro-Christ, or you're not Christian and you're over here anti-Christ. And so he's writing to these believers, children of God, saying, listen, keep believing the fundamentals of the facts, the information that I've passed on to you, that Jesus is the Messiah. He is the Christ, the only one. He is God who put on flesh. This is who he is. And don't let any deceivers come in. He calls them liars if they deny this, and calls them antichrist. Now, this word is only used 4 times by John. It's used in no other book of the Bible. Next, let me find it over here. It's used in chapter 4, verse 2 and 3. He says, by this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus has come in the flesh is from God. And every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you heard was coming and now is in the world already. So what we find is that even during the time of John, Antichrist were among these people. It was the last hour. Many of the biblical writers refer to the time that they are in as the last hour, the last days. This is the time after Christ has come, and now they have entered the last days, the last hour. And he is saying, you know it is, because there's Antichrist who have come. So what you find as you look at the Bible is the prophecies of the Old Testament that are all pushing forward, pointing forward to the time when God's anointed one, the Messiah, the Christ, would come. And then we find that as the Christ came, it was a great divide, as was announced by Simeon the prophet over baby Jesus, that this was going to be a sign that was going to cause much divide. And indeed it did. Many saw him, received him, believed in him as the Son of God who has put on flesh, who has dwelt among us, right? As John confesses in chapter 1, as the Messiah, the Christ. Then others hated this fact and wanted to murder him, wanted to kill him because he said he was the Christ. Now, believers, Christians, those who profess to know Christ, they must acknowledge the true Christ. John is writing to a people here, letting them know this is who Jesus is. If you deny these facts, then you are anti-Christ. So, long story short, are you anti-Christ? Hopefully not. Do you acknowledge that Jesus is the Son of God, that he has come in the flesh, that he is the Christ, the Messiah, and the only way to heaven? Then praise God. You are pro-Christ, and your faith and belief is in the right Jesus Christ. But if you start pulling those key ingredients out, you have formulated a Jesus that does not exist, and you have become anti-Christ. I hope I've given you something to think about today. It's really hard to get this in just a few minutes. If you'd like to find out more, feel free to go to our church website where all of our sermons can be downloaded there or listened to, or you can visit us on Sermon Audio to hear all of our sermons. Thanks for listening today. Have a great day.